Good morning, everybody. It's great to see everybody in person again. It's awesome to see all the excitement and buzz around 5G. To see that 5G will truly be a transformative technology. And I agree, it will be a transformative technology. But I'll say only if it is secure. If we look at all the industries, they're using 5G as a foundation of their digital transformation. And what attracts them to 5G is the great reliability and performance of 5G networks. Now, 5G has some amazing inbuilt security capabilities. But those capabilities will only take you so far. In the world of rising, sophisticated, and evasive cyber attacks, they're increasing every single day. And so what we really need to think about is that how do we ensure that we are able to make 5G secure to help enterprises on their digital transformation. Now, 5G has the potential to drive the next digital transformation. So let's talk about market sizing for a minute. We've all seen different market size opportunities around 5G. But the one thing to keep in mind is that 5G is all about the enterprises. The enterprises are going to drive this digital transformation. So this statistic is something that's really dear to me. It talks of a $1.5 trillion opportunity in 2030. Now think about it. Digitization opens up an amazing, amazing opportunity to create new capabilities, to have richer experiences, and create unprecedented economic opportunities for everybody. And using 5G, you're going to see that transformation happening at a very, very rapid pace. Enterprises are going to depend on 5G to run their critical business operations, their critical business applications, and they will pay additional dollars for differentiated 5G services. The only way to deliver the promise of 5G is through enterprise-grade security. And you may ask, why so? So let's talk about some of the verticals that are on the forefront of driving 5G. We have industrials, manufacturing, transportation, logistics. You have critical infrastructure, utilities, mining, oil and gas. And then you have the healthcare verticals. Now, what's common in all of these three verticals at the forefront of 5G? They are also the most security-sensitive industries. They're going to open new opportunities, drive new outcomes, enable remote workers, drive data and analytics to the edge, open up new opportunities for mass customization, reduction of OpEx, enabling of the Internet of Things. The stakes are super high. If you think of these industries, from safety of highways to safety of your transportation to safety of your oil and gas, and even safety of human lives. So we need to ensure that we marry the performance and reliability that 5G brings, along with the enterprise-grade security, to help these industries accelerate their transformation on the journey of digitization. And I can tell you for sure, it ain't happening with traditional mobile security. The traditional mobile security was not designed for the enterprise users. It was based on signatures and databases, layer 3 IP addresses and ports. If you think of the new wave of all the sophisticated attacks we are seeing, we need to be able to operate at a layer 7 level, drive that application level visibility to ensure that we can have policies which are granular enough for a user and a device. Now, 5G has some amazing inbuilt security capabilities: user authentication, user privacy, over-the-air encryption, protection of the signaling stacks. But we need to also ensure that the mobile traffic that gets transported over the 5G network, we secure that. Secure that across all threat vectors. And that's what we're driving. The second point to note is that 5G inherently uses tunneling technologies and network address translation. We need to ensure that we're able to identify the user, the device, to the IMSI or IMEI, so we can apply the policies that enterprises users need and able to pinpoint exactly where the threat comes from. That's critical. It's important. We need to ensure that when organizations drive digital transformation, the security capabilities they have are at the very minimum equal to, if not better, than what they already have in their existing enterprise infrastructure. So how do we achieve this from the perspective of zero trust? To simplify it, zero trust is having no notion of implied trust. We're all living in a world where everything is hybrid. Users, devices, your applications, your data in hybrid clouds. When you look at 5G, we need to ensure that we're protecting this across all layers, not just the signaling stack, application, data, management, slice security. We're securing all locations, not just your N6 or your GI interfaces, which are internet bound, but your radio access network, your roaming infrastructure, all locations. And then across the entire spectrum of all threats that we see. Antivirus, command and control connections, malware, DNS security, URL filtering, your IoT, your data, your SaaS security, across all locations. As 5G ushers in a new wave of containerized applications, we need to also ensure we protect the entire software lifecycle of CI/CD, bringing together the power of automation, bringing together the power of AI and ML to ensure that we are able to create a more secure 5G for the enterprises. Now, the last point I want to talk about is really around how mobile service providers are now thinking about, and many of them are already on this journey, of treating security not as a cost center, but as a profit center. And let me explain what I mean by that. If you think about it, mobile service providers are looking to differentiate themselves. They want to move with speed. They want to move with agility. They want to ensure that they are able to provide enterprise users customizable solutions. They want to drive mass customization. They also want to reduce their OpEx. They want to offer differentiated services that can help them make more profits. So what are these differentiated services? Slice security, dynamically creating slices. That's what the 5G technology allows you to do. But ensuring that these end-to-end slices are secure. Creating new services for mobile edge compute to drive that whole edge evolution. To create private 5G networks for organizations that require that low latency, that reliability, that performance, connecting things that they have never connected before, ensuring that they're able to accelerate their transformation of digitization to create some unbelievable experiences for their users, for their customers, and their partners. At Palo Alto Networks, we're really excited. We partner with many of these global service providers to help drive the transformation of secure 5G networks. Come visit our booth to see more on how we are helping move from profit center to a profit center, from a cost center, to create new services that can enable service providers to provide new opportunities for enterprise customers who can use that as the foundation of their digital transformation. Thank you. Ian?
Okay, thank you, Anand. Thank you for your presentation. So let's deep dive into some of those security, cybersecurity value-added services that you just mentioned there. Obviously, one of the key questions in the mind of many service providers is, okay, you know, what do these services provide, and how are they going to, how can we leverage them? And perhaps you'd like to just go into a little bit more detail on that subject.
Yeah. If you think about if you think of the cybersecurity organization from an enterprise perspective, last year we spent about $170 billion on enterprise cybersecurity, growing at between 10 to 15% depending on which data you want to believe in. But it shows that there's a massive opportunity and a massive growth. They're using that to drive their digital transformation. And when you think about all the capabilities that they're looking from a 5G perspective, it's across the entire facet. But the most important, organizations are on the journey of zero trust. They really want to ensure that any user or any device from any network Could be 4G, could be 5G, it could be your enterprise Wi-Fi network. Accessing any application, any data is consistently secure with the best-in-class security, but also have the most optimal end-user experience. And that's why the edge discussion is so prevalent. So they're looking to secure their network. What I mean by network security is, network security is a very nebulous term, as you know. It doesn't secure the network. It secures everything on the network, the users, the devices, and the applications they access. Similarly, as service providers are building their 5G networks in the cloud, in a cloud-native fashion, we need to ensure that we're securing that infrastructure, their containers, their serverless functions, their applications. And every organization must now assume that at some point in time, they will be under a cyber attack with the sophistication of a nation-state level attack. So how do you ensure that if that happens, you remediate yourself very fast, you quarantine the things that you need to quarantine fast, and you're able to have that agility? That's through the power of ML and AI through SOC automation.
Absolutely. So you mentioned many terms there, Anand. Obviously, potentially to the enterprise, this could look like quite a complicated picture. So it's obviously very important for enterprises that cybersecurity be packaged, it becomes cybersecurity as a service. Just wondered whether you could perhaps explain, how those services can be best packaged for enterprises to make it their lives fundamentally easier in future.
Yeah, that's a very good question. It's around what kind of services can service providers use for 5G or provide to the end customer 5G. And I would put them in two categories. One is around secure access service edge, which is around bringing together networking and security together, delivering it a massively distributed cloud service. And in many cases, that's basically enabling branches to also be 5G enabled. So not just the users who are mobile or at home, but on the go, but branches to be 5G enabled. And that is one big use case. The second big use case is around how do you provide 5G services to enterprise customers, to enable these enterprise customers to accelerate their digital transformation. And really, there are three key services that we are seeing as we work with enterprise customers and service providers that they are using. First and foremost is dynamic slicing. And you've seen the work on dynamic slicing. We have some great work that we've done with Dish Networks on enabling end-to-end dynamic slices. So they can give an enterprise customer a secure slice end-to-end. Or the work that we're doing with partners like AT&T for mobile edge compute to enable that edge transition to get data and analytics at the edge. And last but not the least, we're seeing many industrial and manufacturing customers accelerate their journey on using private 5G. They need that low latency, they need the reliability, they need that performance. And there's a big opportunity for service providers to provide managed offerings, because enterprise customers do not want to do it themselves. They want to rely on service providers to give them managed offerings so that they can focus on what they are best at, their own business.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the other aspect of this, obviously, is more looking from a network perspective. Obviously, with 5G, we're seeing network functions being virtualized, moving into the cloud. We're seeing, obviously, the volume of data increasing exponentially. We're seeing the ability to customize the network, customize the services it offers being increased. Deeper integration with enterprise services, et cetera. So a lot is changing with 5G. How do you deliver what you've just described in this very complicated environment?
Yeah. Look, it is a complicated environment. The attack surface has increased tremendously with users everywhere, applications everywhere, and you're having your data everywhere. The way to think about securing it, first thing is to know what is the visibility. So from an outside-in perspective, you need to understand exactly what are your vulnerable spots. Once you identify those, then it's easier to get on the path of remediating them. Once you've done that outside-in perspective, then you need to start looking at two different aspects, your network and your cloud. From a network perspective, you need to ensure that you're securing all layers at all locations across all threat vectors. So this is your RAN, your roaming interfaces, your N6 or GI interfaces, your internet-bound interfaces, holistically. Second, if in many cases, you're building your mobile network in public cloud infrastructure, you're using advanced technologies like containerized functions, serverless functions, microservices architecture, software-defined networks. How do you ensure that you have visibility, compliance, runtime security for your containers, and how you're using infrastructure as code to shift your security to the left. Those are going to be critical aspects as you're able to look at the new paradigm where you get a lot of benefits from moving to cloud-native functions in terms of speed and agility, mass customization, reduction of OpEx, focus. Like you're able to spin up and spin down services on the fly and scale as your users scale, your location scale for base stations, etc. But you need to ensure that you're thinking through this properly from an end-to-end perspective.
Absolutely. Obviously, we've talked about security as a service. We've mentioned that this is extremely valuable to enterprises. Obviously, we're sat here in Industry City, and we can see many different enterprises here representing many different vertical industries. Is it a one-size-fits-all solution for enterprises, or are there potentially variability depending on which industry sector the enterprise is working in?
Yeah, I think it's yes and no. So there's really no one-size-fits-all. However, there are enough things around different verticals around compliance. For example, if you're at healthcare, the compliance things that you can do that are standardized in many cases, and it can apply more generically in that vertical. But that's vertical specific. But still, broadly from securing all your locations, all your layers across all your threat vectors, is not going to be just one size that fits all, because every industry is in a different place, every situation is different.
And I guess that comes back to the customization point you made earlier, the flexibility 5G to customize a security solution for every industry effectively.
Yes.
Okay, I think we're running just a couple of minutes for our one-to-one here. Just wondered if there's perhaps a key point that you'd like to highlight, Anand, from your presentation, just to kind of reinforce that message for the audience today.
Yeah. I think the key message that I would like to say is that we are seeing 5G as a foundation that enterprises are using to drive that digital transformation. The digital transformation is going to open up some amazing opportunities, new capabilities, new business models, new streams of revenue. Can only achieve all of this if it's secure. Can only achieve all of this if you're allowing service providers to offer new innovative services that they can monetize and securely help their enterprise customers thrive on. So that's the key message.
Okay, thank you, Anand. Well, please stay seated. We're actually going to now broaden out our horizons. We're going to bring some additional panelists into the mix here. So, gentlemen, if you'd like to come and join us, please take a seat. Any order. And thank you, Anand, for that discussion. Ooh. Please. Okay, welcome to the stage. We'll just start perhaps with just some quick introductions, just running down the line here. Maybe Bob, you'd like to just quickly introduce yourselves and the other panelists?
Sure. Bob Lyle. I'm the Senior Vice President of Vertical Markets at SpyCloud and also the Chair of the Device Security Group of the GSMA.
Okay, welcome. Mike?
Hello, my name is Mike Klepper. I'm the Practice Director for Cyber Operations inside of AT&T Cybersecurity Consulting.
Hello, this is Silal Roy. I have the CTO and the asset development role in our cloud-first networks in Accenture. Nice to meet you all.
Okay, thank you, gentlemen. Hill, keep your mask off because I've got a first question is up for you. So obviously, we're here talking about 5G security. Why is 5G security such a hot topic?
Great question, Ian. So when you look at it, two parts. One is the size of the prize, and another part is the apprehension from the unknowns, and I will break it down. So think of Joe and regular consumer going about his daily life. He hears a lot of things will happen in 5G. His payment, probably his car will run on 5G. And Sally, an industry executive, trying to move her enterprise to 5G. So her assembly line will run on 5G. Her regular managing the worker security will run on 5G. So given that size of the prize, and then when they hear about terms like, hey, network moving to cloud, network is becoming software, it's programmable, we have Open RAN. For them, they do not necessarily understand all those. They see a lot of new things coming in suddenly, and their life is almost going to 5G. So, geez, do they know what they're doing with all this? Now, if we dig into this a little bit more, Anand did a great job sharing some of the numbers. I mean, we did some research on it in Accenture, and we observed around 1.5 trillion in cumulative GDP contribution just to US over 5 years from 5G. Our research shows around 80% of enterprise executives, they believe that 5G will transform their networks and the way they operate. So pretty staggering numbers. And when you look at that, you go to a mine, they're running their building size earth mover on 5G. They don't want it to get hacked. They don't want a denial of service on that thing. So that's the part one, where people are very, very particular about the things they can do with 5G and what might happen.
Wonderful.
Now, just quickly, the second part.
Sorry.
We talked about the size of the prize. It's my turn. Okay. The size of the prize. The second part is like when you get this disruptive impact, there are a lot of disruptive technologies. So when we talk about cloud, DevOps, all that, first look, it sounds like we are going into unknown. Yes, cloud has openness, but at the same time, there are cloud security that's coming in. Then when we talk about new technologies like Edge, IoT, AI, ML, yes, they are new. At the same time, they bring in new capabilities for securing the network. So overall, it's a combination of the size of the prize and the unknowns that make it a top thing in everyone's mind and the mind space.
Okay, okay. Thank you, Hilal, for the explanation. I think it very much reinforces what Anand's been describing in his keynote. And obviously, you know, it's great that when we talk about 5G, the security topic is fundamental. I think in the past with 2G, 3G, 4G, it's all been about connectivity, coverage, speeds. You know, with 5G, we can very much add security into that top tier of agenda items for the technology. Let's perhaps move to Bob here. Our session here today is called the 5G Security Revolution. But I hear others in the industry talk about it being more of an evolution. And I wondered if perhaps, Bob, you could just offer some clarifying thoughts on, you know, are we seeing a revolution here or an evolution?
Yeah, and I think, good question. I think some of my colleagues may have some thoughts on this comment as well, but a lot of what we're seeing is that 5G is going to have obviously much greater bandwidth, speed, lower latency. So you're going to have a proliferation of IoT devices and a lot more devices connect to the network. So you're going to have a big emergence of an attack surface that's much larger. So that's going to attract a lot more cyber criminals to conduct ransomware attacks and other things. So that's going to be one area that you're going to have to have a step function in security defenses to try to stop all these attacks.
Yeah, so. Okay. And perhaps, Mike, you'd like to chip in here.
Thank you. From my perspective, 5G is really, the progression there depends on your vantage point. If you're at the service provider space, a lot of the security inherent in the 5G protocol is really, you know, improvements on things that were introduced previously. Now, there are some elements that are unique to 5G, but these are going to really be realized once we arrive at a point where you're talking about, you know, 5G standalone networks. And there's a lot of investment that has to happen before we really get to that place on a broad scale. So from that perspective, because there is going to be that journey, by definition, you're going to be evolving into that kind of brighter security future. Now, from an industry perspective, however, from a business perspective, looking to embrace privatized 5G, I think that will be revolutionary from a use case perspective, but also from a responsibility and technology perspective. You're talking about new protocols, new infrastructure, you know, possibly managing private spectrum. These are all things that private industry, for the most part, has not had to deal with previously. And when you look at that type of sea change, you open up the challenges that we've had, right? If we look at any major technology shift, we can look back in time and see the promise and the stumbling that happens with that in the pursuit, because generally speaking, people underinvest in things like education and training for the people that are responsible for the security and administration of these platforms. And people make mistakes because we cannot be 100% correct 100% of the time. And that's where you've seen issues and exposures from cloud infrastructure previously, is from those human mistakes made. It's not that the capabilities weren't there to secure the infrastructure of the platform, it's that those capabilities weren't properly understood and implemented. And so I think that from that perspective, you've kind of got that bifurcated path there between revolution and evolution, and definitely some risks that come into play.
Yeah, so Mike, let's just pick up on one of the points there. You mentioned obviously the human factors. We have this technology, we have extra technical capabilities coming in 5G, but there's always the weak link is the human factors involved. Perhaps you could just describe how an organization might be addressing those particular issues. I'm just keen to delve into that in a little bit more detail.
Well, certainly, like I said, training and education is going to be a big part of that, but ultimately, we are already living in the midst of a significant shortage of IT talent. That problem is not going to go away. And even if it were to go away, it's not feasible to scale with billions of devices and just upscale an IT support community in a linear fashion like that. So obviously, pushing toward automation and the ubiquitous terms that come in with that, ML, AI, those types of things, to react to issues in machine time is going to be critical. And this is going to create, I think, something of an identity crisis in security groups inside of enterprises that might have traditionally been more focused on system administration and just keeping the lights on and running, and they're going to need to mature into more of a threat intelligence hunting type of an organization to really allow the automation to drive reaction to the automation that the attackers will be using. We've already seen cases where machine learning and AI have been used to profile for phishing attacks based on Twitter data and things along those lines. So the idea that we as the defenders alone will be leveraging AI and ML is ludicrous. The attackers will be doing that also.
Yeah. Perhaps other panelists would like to step in here, because we mentioned AI and ML. We can't let that one pass, I'm afraid, Mike. We hear it being described as the solution to all our problems. Perhaps the panelists would like to give an honest opinion on these technologies.
I think two points. First is the point around the evolution, revolution, the discussion. I definitely would think, if you look at how 5G cloud-native networks are built, that's a sea change from how 3G and 4G networks are built, so it's a revolution. They're using all the capabilities of the public cloud, cloud-native functions, microservices architecture, serverless functions, software-defined methodologies. That's definitely a revolution. And they're building massive mobile networks on the public cloud, something that, if you rewind the clock 10, 12 years ago, the public cloud were used for enterprise applications or data storage or web hosting and the same thing. So it's been a big, big change. And it's finance of reliability on the public cloud, but also things around millions of endpoints, geographically dispersed base stations coming up on the fly, hundreds of petabytes of data transitioning to the things every day. And that brings down to the point on AI and ML and data, because the key capabilities of 5G are going to be automation, scalability, and security. And it's not going to be done by humans. It's going to be done by machines. It's going to be done through the power of AI and ML and data to make sure that the bits and bytes of data that we are seeing on the network is converted to information, the information to insights, the insights that can lead to outcomes, and then a feedback loop to ensure that we keep making it better.
Absolutely. Anand, you've sort of led me to my next question there, because obviously you highlighted, 5G, billions of devices, we're surrounded by all these different IoT use cases here. And this is perhaps where I'll bring Bob into the discussion. Obviously, we see all these different vertical industries. I just really want to delve into that point about, the one-size-fits-all versus, specific security solutions for specific industries, and perhaps whether you can give some insight on the different requirements that sit out there.
Sure, I think each of the different industry verticals will have to take a different stance of how they protect themselves. Some of them are going to be more susceptible. A lot of them, like healthcare or oil and gas, I think other verticals have been mentioned, are going to have an explosion even more than others of IoT devices that are connected due to 5G. And in each vertical will then be more susceptible to potential attacks, so may have to tailor their strategy. At Spy Cloud, we actually produce a Fortune 1000 report each year, so we have that coming out soon. And in that, we look at each vertical. There's 21 verticals, I guess, in the Fortune 1000. Interestingly, telecoms is the worst vertical there is as far as kind of old school defenses of breach exposure credentials and malware credentials that have been seen on the dark web. So interestingly, the telecom sector itself, some of the large mobile network operators are going to need to work together to try to shore up those defenses. So this is just kind of old school back to even current technologies, but doing things like making sure you're not susceptible to ransomware attacks or account takeover and those type of things. So in addition to all the network level securities that everyone else has talked about. So
Bob, you mentioned the mobile industry needs to do more, work together to create better secure networks, secure solutions. Can you give any more insight on how the mobile industry might do that?
Yeah, I think others may bring up, or it might be a future question, is information sharing. So ways that the industry can work together in response to different threats. One example would be FluBot is one issue that attacked the industry earlier this year, kind of at the mobile device level. But in those types of things are going to be exacerbated when we get to 5G and there's a larger attack surface and bad actors are trying to take advantage of that. So I think information sharing would be one area where industry can work together and then put together a layered defense strategy, multiple layers of security solutions.
Well, I guess in terms of that sort of industry working together, it's a much wider industry now. It's not just the mobile industry working with its peers. It's it's the complete industry here, the healthcare industry, the mobile industry, the aviation industry, et cetera, all coming together, information sharing. Perhaps our other panelists might have some insight to share their own activities. They're involved in information sharing and the value that it potentially adds.
Yeah, I think it's a very good point that Bob mentioned around information sharing. There are certain things that you do across verticals to standardize them in terms of compliance, like for healthcare. And in certain industries or with the government, you're sharing information more to understand the threat landscape, the threat intelligence, so you're better prepared to prevent attacks. But the whole idea of AI and ML is to basically try to prevent attacks that never were seen before. And that can only happen when you embed real-time, inline deep learning within the data plane path itself to ensure you protect these future hacks.
Yeah, I think certainly that's the vision, the promise. Mike, do you want to chip in here in terms of perhaps some of your activities on information sharing and?
Well, one of the things that the threat actors are very good at is sharing and or trafficking in data that is used against industry, right? They collaborate phenomenally well. It's inherent to their mission statement, if you will, if you think of them as a business. Industry across the board is generally fairly bad at that. We've tended to be very, close to the vest about, security issues or breach data or things along those lines. Now, fortunately, we've recognized that as a shortcoming, and organizations are increasingly involving themselves in, CERT or ISAC programs, either that are aligned with their industry vertical or their region or nation. And this is something that, again, as the security function has to evolve as the implementation of all these technologies we've been talking about, and they move more in that, threat analyst, cyber intelligence kind of a role, there is an opportunity there to increase that activity, that sharing with those certs and ISACs. That way, we're able to all benefit from data that any one organization is seeing.
Thank you, Mike. Hilal, anything to add from your perspective in terms of how industry can work better together to solve some of these challenges?
Yeah, sure. So one part, I think between Anand, Bob, and Mike, they covered a lot of good points. Other part I will add is when you look at the networks running on open source codes, that's something pretty new. We didn't used to have those before. So also running on cloud, which we talked about, like if you are using a particular hyperscaler globally. So some of that information sharing through that, when you are reviewing the open source code or ruggedizing it or discovering an issue with a particular cloud, the scale of that sharing is automatically much bigger than compared to the siloed way of working before. And then, of course, in GSMA, You have the vulnerability disclosure program that started, which is another great avenue for information sharing.
Okay, thank you, Hilal. I have to mention at this point, because we've been talking about information sharing and Mike did talk about industry vertical schemes. The GSMA obviously runs its telecommunications ISAC service, and that's one of the schemes that's sort of designed to not just facilitate information sharing around the telecoms industry, but also wider into financial services ISAC and aviation ISAC and so forth. And you know, if you want to talk more about that, then grab one of us after the session today. Let's just perhaps move the discussion on. Obviously, we're here talking about 5G, and we're obviously aware of perhaps some of the more traditional security threats that have existed in the past. We can talk about malware, ransomware, et cetera, et cetera. Is 5G going to sort of change the landscape here? Are we like to see, certain types of threat increase, others decrease as a result of 5G security? Let's talk about trends.
No, good question. I don't know if my mic's on, but one comment on trends would be things like ransomware attacks and other things that have been in existence previously. I think those are going to be stepped up with the proliferation of devices out there, because cyber criminals are going to see there's a larger attack surface. There's a way to conduct ransomware attacks in the healthcare industry or oil and gas or other things. Unfortunately, I think there was an industry study that there were 700 million attempted ransomware attacks last year, or ransomware attempts. That's going to rise. That's obviously a huge number. So I think the industry is going to have to work together to layer defenses and shore up, prevent against phishing emails. And it turns out that even though ransomware attacks are big budget items, it's kind of old school technologies to get at those. Number one, in a survey that SpyCloud did, the number 1 and 2 attempts were just phishing emails and compromised credentials. So old school things. So we're going to need to make sure we use layered defenses to prevent against account takeover of employees, or prevent against having your subscribers or consumers compromised in malware attacks. So those are kind of defenses that have existed today, but we're going to have to increase work on those to shore them up.
Thank you. Others, please chip in on this subject.
I think you're going to see. I think you're going to see more and more attacks as you have more and more users that are more geographically dispersed, accessing more and more data and applications that are really everywhere. So that's going to inherently happen. The attack surface is going to increase tremendously. To Bob's point around how do we ensure that you put the layers of defenses across, I think you need to put it across all layers, all locations, all threat vectors, and ensure that you are comprehensively looking at this end to end versus in a siloed fashion.
Thank you. Mike?
So ransomware is obviously very much top of mind for most everybody in the industry, for good reason. But it's certainly not the only attack vector. I think that when you look at ransomware, you may find some 5G may open up just as it opens up opportunities for us. There may be, as part of that distributed infrastructure, novel ways in which ransomware attacks are initiated that we haven't seen yet. That might come up. Obviously, when you start talking about the number of devices that are going to be onboarded into the 5G network and the bandwidth available, DDoS becomes a concern pretty quickly. Given the numbers involved, we could see some very large volumetric attacks. And so having strategies across that distributed infrastructure to mitigate and throttle back those types of attacks is going to be key.
Two quick things I will bring up. One is around 5G was designed as a solution, like a programmable network. So the configuration architecture can take different forms. Is it on?
Just let Hilal. That's it.
And when you have that, the possibility of human mistake in changing the configurations, that happens.
Well, let's let Hilal sort his microphone out. We'll go to somebody else, I think. It's okay. Obviously, we're talking about, I think it's pretty picked up in your theme earlier, Anand, obviously looking at 5G and the fact that 5G is going to increase sort of data volumes, increase the number of different services and types of traffic being carried by 5G networks. How are enterprises going to sort of adapt to sort of cope with these particular changes, and what perhaps considerations should they take into account?
I think in addition, you'll have hundreds of petabytes of data traversing the 5G network every single day, even for the enterprise. As you want to open up the new services we talked about, like mobile edge compute, where you're doing more and more processing at the edge, the amount of data that you're going to process is going to be tremendous. So I think Bob mentioned this earlier around, this can only happen when you're able to process data using machines, using AI, ML, and also separate which data you want to process from a security perspective, which data you want to process from an offload perspective after you identify the given flow and know that now I don't need to do a lot of processing on that data because I want to offload that on the fast path. So I think it's going to be a combination of using that data more effectively, applying the right level of policies which are granular on the application and device level, and using the power of AI and ML to making those decisions.
Thank you. So I think we're kind of getting towards the end of our panel session here. We've got a couple of minutes left, and as sort of traditional, I guess, with panel sessions, we should give each of our panelists an opportunity perhaps to just give some closing remarks and some final thoughts on perhaps a key takeaway for the audience today, and perhaps the key issue on security that perhaps they should consider when they get back to their organization later in the week. I don't know who'd perhaps like to take this first. Perhaps we'll start down the line there with Hilal.
Yeah, my final point will be, Ian, one is around, though a lot of things have changed in 5G in terms of how we look at it, the applications we use. There are no replacements to the traditional governance structure, ensuring the employees are trained, we put in the right framework in place, and do an audit. Like always check, is it working? Have periodic audit, the vulnerability test, all those. I think those will continue to be golden practices.
So 2 final thoughts that I have. The first is, in any kind of distributed infrastructure, you really want to make sure you understand where responsibility is distributed. That's been a bit of a challenge previously. And the next thing is to focus on the basics: patch management, user identification, and management, and configuration management, and learn to do those things ferociously well. They are going to save you more often than not.
I think final thought is like, we're going to see a lot of opportunities, a lot of data, a lot of devices on 5G. Yeah, they're going to be everywhere. I think it's important to ensure that we are protecting all aspects, protecting your network infrastructure, protecting your cloud, and then having the assumption that what do I need to do from an automation perspective to remediate any threats I see in the network, and how do I get that mean time to resolution to a really small time. And then on the point that I think Mike mentioned around patching, etc., absolutely do that. But we also have IoT devices that you don't patch, right? So we need to make sure that we are having the right level of segmentation done on that infrastructure so that we reduce the attack area of in case get infected.
So I think one overarching thought would be that as there's new opportunities and technological advances, cyber criminals and bad actors are going to want to just take advantage of that and leverage it. So I think they're going to evolve in their attack techniques in ways that we can't really imagine, I think, as some people have pointed out. So I think as the cyber criminals evolve, we're going to need to evolve as well as an industry and work together to try to combat that. So.
Okay. Thank you, panelists, for your wise words and your insight today. That brings this particular first session of the Security Summit to a close. So perhaps a round of applause for our panel today. Thank you. And I'm sure our panelists will be available for a few minutes if you want to grab them and ask your own questions, grab them after the session here. They won't be escaping too far. Obviously, this is our first session for today. Our second session will be starting at 11:30. We'll be looking at 5G, network diversity and supply chain, a very interesting topic, and one that I'm sure you'll all find very interesting. Okay, so that wraps up our session, and we'll meet you here again, hopefully in about half an hour.